The massive white ship drifted silently through space, its hull marked with giant red crosses that could be seen from thousands of miles away. The UHMS Mercer's Dawn was bigger than most warships, but it carried no weapons. Instead, its belly was filled with medical equipment, hospital beds, and supplies to help the wounded. Captain James Morrison stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars. He was a tired man with gray hair and kind eyes. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. The ship hummed with the sound of life support systems and medical equipment running day and night. "Captain," said Dr. Emily Richardson as she walked onto the bridge. She was the chief doctor, a woman in her 40s with steady hands and a gentle voice. "We have 2,000 patients aboard now. Humans, aliens, soldiers, civilians. All of them hurt and needing help." Morrison nodded. The war had been going on for 3 years now. Different alien races fought each other across the galaxy, and innocent people got caught in the middle. The Mercer's Dawn was one of the few ships that helped everyone, no matter what species they were or which side they fought for. In the medical bays below, Dr. Robert Hayes moved between the beds. He was a quiet man who studied alien biology, but he spent most of his time now treating wounded children. His wife Sarah worked beside him, her brown hair tied back as she changed bandages on a young alien boy. Their 8-year-old daughter Anna sat in the corner, drawing pictures for the patients to make them smile. "Daddy, will the hurt people get better?" Anna asked, holding up a drawing of the Mercer's Dawn with flowers around it. Hayes knelt down and hugged his daughter. "Yes, sweetheart. We help everyone get better here. That's what we do." The ship had been traveling for 6 days to reach a refugee camp near Kepler Station. Thousands of people had fled their homes when the fighting started, and many were sick and injured. The Mercer's Dawn was their only hope. "Captain." David Park, the communications officer, suddenly called out. His voice was sharp with worry. "I'm picking up ships dropping out of hyperspace. Big ones." Morrison moved to the sensor display. "How many?" "6 heavy cruisers, sir. They're Kithran ships." A cold feeling settled in Morrison's stomach. The Kithrans were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who took what they wanted by force. But they had always respected the medical ships. It was one of the few rules of war that everyone followed. "Open communications," Morrison ordered. "Send them our medical identification." The view screen flickered to life, showing the approaching Kithran warships. They were dark, angular vessels that looked like metal predators hunting through space. "Attention Kithran vessels," Morrison spoke clearly into the microphone. "This is Captain Morrison of the hospital ship Mercer's Dawn. We are operating under interstellar medical laws. Our ship contains only doctors, nurses, and wounded people from many different species. We are not part of this war." The Kithran ships kept coming closer. "Captain," Park said quietly, "they're not responding. And sir, they're charging their weapons." Morrison felt his heart race. There must be some mistake. "Send the message again. Make sure they understand we're a medical ship." "This is the hospital ship Mercer's Dawn," Morrison repeated, his voice getting louder. "We have sick children aboard. We have wounded soldiers from both sides. We are protected by galactic law." The first energy beam hit the ship's side. Alarms screamed throughout the Mercer's Dawn as the lights flickered. The ship shook like a giant had grabbed it and started shaking. In the medical bay, patients cried out in fear and pain as they were thrown from their beds. "They're attacking us." Park shouted over the noise. "They're actually attacking a hospital ship." More weapon blasts hit the ship. The hull began to crack and break apart. I rushed out into space with a horrible whistling sound. Emergency doors slammed shut, but not fast enough to save everyone. Dr. Richardson was thrown against a wall as her medical bay exploded around her. Through the smoke and fire, she saw patients dying in their beds. The young alien boy she had been treating just minutes before lay still, his small body crushed by falling metal. In another section, Robert Hayes tried to shield his family as their world fell apart. A plasma bolt punched through the wall right next to them. The heat was so intense it melted the metal beds. "Sarah. Anna." Hayes called out as another explosion rocked the ship. He reached for his wife and daughter, but a piece of the ceiling crashed down between them. Sarah was trapped under twisted metal, blood running down her face. "Robert," she whispered, "take care of Anna." But when Hayes turned to find his daughter, she was lying motionless on the floor. The 8-year-old girl who had drawn flowers that morning would never draw again. The attack went on for 17 long minutes. The Kithrans showed no mercy, no hesitation. They destroyed medical equipment, killed doctors who were trying to save lives, and murdered patients who could not even get out of their beds. Captain Morrison died at his post, trying until the very end to contact the attackers and make them understand what they were doing. When it was over, the Mercer's Dawn was a broken shell floating in space. More than 600 people were dead. The survivors huddled in the few sections that still had air, waiting for rescue ships that might never come. Dr. Robert Hayes sat in the wreckage, holding the bodies of his wife and daughter. Around him, the ship that had once been a symbol of hope and healing was now a tomb. The quiet scientist who had dedicated his life to helping others felt something break inside his mind. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 days after the attack, the rescue ship Defiance carried the survivors of the Mercer's Dawn through space toward Earth. The ship was crowded and filled with sadness. Doctors and nurses who had spent their lives saving people now sat quietly, their eyes empty and staring at nothing. Dr. Emily Richardson walked through the survivor areas, checking on everyone. She had a bandage around her head and her arm was in a sling, but she kept working because that was all she knew how to do. Most of the survivors talked to each other in whispers, sharing their pain and fear. But Robert Hayes sat alone. Emily had known Hayes for 2 years. He was a gentle man who studied how different alien bodies worked so he could help heal them. He loved his wife and daughter more than anything. He would spend hours reading bedtime stories to Anna and bringing Sarah flowers from the ship's garden. Everyone liked him because he was kind and smart and never raised his voice. The man sitting alone in the corner was not that person anymore. "Robert," Emily said softly as she sat down next to him. "I am so sorry about Sarah and Anna. They were wonderful people." Hayes looked up at her, and Emily had to stop herself from backing away. His eyes were different now. They were cold and empty, like looking into deep space. But behind that emptiness was something burning, something that made her feel afraid. "Emily," Hayes said in a voice that was too calm, too quiet. "I need you to help me get access to the military research labs on Earth. I need samples of Kithran blood and tissue. And I need them to let me work without anyone watching or stopping me. Robert, you are hurt and sad right now. You need time to rest and feel better. Maybe talk to someone about what happened." Hayes stood up slowly. He was not a big man, but something about the way he moved made Emily want to run away. "They killed my wife while she was trying to save an alien child, Emily. They killed my 8-year-old daughter who was drawing pictures to make patients smile. They killed doctors and nurses and wounded people who could not even fight back." He walked to the small window and looked out at the stars. "I am going to make sure it never happens again. Never." 2 hours later, Admiral William Carter received a request for a meeting. He knew who Robert Hayes was because the scientist had helped develop new ways to treat wounded soldiers. Carter had expected Hayes to ask for help dealing with his loss, maybe request time off to grieve. He did not expect the man who walked into his office. Hayes moved like a person with a mission. He carried a data pad and his eyes had that same cold burning that had scared Emily. He sat down across from the Admiral and placed the data pad on the desk. "Admiral Carter, I can end the Kithran threat forever. Not just win battles against them, but make it impossible for them to ever hurt innocent people again." Carter picked up the data pad and began reading. His face went pale as he understood what he was looking at. "Dr. Hayes, this is a biological weapon. A weapon that would target their entire species." "Yes," Hayes said simply. "This could kill millions of them." "No, Admiral. What I have designed is much more precise than that." Hayes leaned forward, his voice still terribly calm. "This weapon will only kill Kithrans who are trying to hurt others. Kithrans who live in peace will be completely safe." Carter set down the data pad with shaking hands. "Doctor, what you are talking about it borders on genocide. We cannot." "Genocide?" Hayes interrupted, and for the first time, emotion crept into his voice. "Genocide is attacking a hospital ship full of children and doctors. Genocide is killing people who spent their lives trying to help others. What I am offering you is justice." The Admiral stared at the quiet scientist who had become something else entirely. How would this weapon work? Hayes pulled up files on the datapad. "Kithrans have a weakness in their breathing system that other species do not have. I can create a virus that gets into their bodies and waits. If they live peaceful lives, nothing happens. But if their body chemistry changes for combat, if they take military drugs, if they prepare to attack others, then the virus activates. And then? They have about 4 minutes to stop fighting and calm down, or their lungs stop working." Carter was quiet for a long time. He thought about the reports from the Mercer's Dawn, about the videos of Kithran ships destroying a hospital. He thought about the 600 innocent people who had died for no reason. "What do you need?" he finally asked. Hayes smiled, and it was the most frightening thing Carter had ever seen. Access to the biological weapons lab on Lunar Base. A team of military scientists who will follow my instructions. And samples of Kithran biology from our prisoners of war. And if I say no? Then more hospital ships will burn, Admiral. More children will die while drawing pictures. More doctors will be killed while trying to save lives. Hayes stood up. I have already lost everything that mattered to me. I have nothing left to lose and nothing left to fear. The only thing I care about now is making sure no one else has to watch their family die because aliens decided to break the most basic laws of war. Carter signed the authorization forms that afternoon. Within a week, Hayes was working in the most secure laboratory humanity had ever built, surrounded by scientists who were both amazed by his brilliance and terrified by what he had become. The gentle doctor who had read bedtime stories to his daughter was gone forever. In his place was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. A man who would use his incredible mind not to heal, but to ensure that healing could continue without fear. The weapon that would change everything had begun to take shape. 6 months after the attack on the Mercer's Dawn, Robert Hayes worked in a secret laboratory deep beneath the surface of Lunar Base. The room was cold and white, filled with machines that hummed quietly as they created something the galaxy had never seen before. Hayes stood before a glass container that held a clear liquid. It looked like water, but inside that innocent fluid was the most dangerous weapon ever made by human hands. Around him, military scientists watched nervously as their leader explained his creation. The pathogen is complete, Hayes said to General Patricia Morgan, who had come to see the weapon for herself. His voice was still that same calm, empty tone that made everyone uncomfortable. It targets only Kithrans. Every other species in the galaxy could drink this liquid and feel nothing more than if they had water. General Morgan studied the container. She was a tough woman who had fought in 3 wars, but something about Hayes made her feel cold inside. How does it work, Doctor? Hayes touched the glass gently, like he was petting a dangerous animal. Kithrans have a special enzyme in their lungs that no other species has. This pathogen finds that enzyme and attaches to it. Once inside their bodies, it waits. Waits for what? For them to become aggressive. For them to prepare for combat. Hayes turned to look at the general with those burning cold eyes. When a Kithran gets ready to fight, their body releases certain chemicals. Their heart beats faster. They inject military drugs to make them stronger and more violent. When the pathogen senses these changes, it activates. General Morgan had read the reports, but hearing Hayes explain it made it more real and more terrifying. And then? Their lungs begin to shut down. They have approximately 4 minutes to stop fighting and calm their body chemistry, or they die. Hayes smiled that cold smile. A Kithran farmer will live a long, healthy life. A Kithran shopkeeper will never feel anything. But a Kithran warrior preparing to attack innocent people will find breathing very difficult very quickly. Dr. Lisa Thompson, one of Hayes' team members, spoke up from her workstation. We have run thousands of tests, General. The pathogen is completely harmless to humans, Altarians, Zentaurians, and every other species we have tested. It only affects Kithrans, and only when they are in an aggressive state. General Morgan nodded slowly. She had come here expecting to stop this project, to tell Hayes that his weapon was too dangerous to use. But after seeing the videos from the Mercer's Dawn, after reading the reports of other Kithran attacks on civilian targets, she found herself asking a different question. How do we deploy it? Hayes had been waiting for this question. The beauty of biological weapons, General, is that they spread naturally. We simply need to introduce it into Kithran space through normal contact. Over the next 3 weeks, Hayes worked with human intelligence services to plan Operation Silent Judgment. The pathogen was so advanced that it could survive in almost any environment. It could live in air, water, food, and even on surfaces for months. Captain Michael Roberts was a trader who had been selling supplies to Kithran colonies for 5 years. He was a big, friendly man who spoke several alien languages and was well liked by his customers. When military intelligence approached him, he thought they wanted information about Kithran military movements. You want me to carry what? Roberts asked when they explained the mission. The pathogen is completely safe for you and your crew, Agent Sarah Williams explained. It is contained in everyday trade goods. Clothing, food supplies, electronic equipment. The Kithrans will never suspect anything. And this weapon will kill them. Only if they try to hurt innocent people, Williams said. The scientist who created it was very specific about that. Peaceful Kithrans will never be affected. Roberts thought about the hospital ship attack. Like most spacers, he knew people who had worked on medical vessels. The idea of attacking a ship full of doctors and wounded patients made him sick. "I'll do it," he said. Similar conversations happened across human space. Traders, diplomats, cultural exchange students, and business representatives all carried the pathogen without knowing it. The containers looked exactly like normal trade goods. The pathogen itself had no smell, no color, and no taste. Ambassador James Fletcher carried it in diplomatic gifts during a peace negotiation on the Kithran homeworld. Dr. Amanda Clark brought it in medical supplies during a humanitarian mission to a Kithran colony. Professor David Martinez carried it in books and artwork during a cultural exchange program. Within 2 months, the pathogen had spread to every major Kithran world. It moved through their air systems, their water supplies, their food distribution networks. Every Kithran in their empire breathed it in, ate it, drank it, and felt nothing at all. Back in his laboratory, Hayes monitored the spread through secret sensors placed by human agents. The pathogen was working perfectly, spreading faster than even he had expected. Soon, every Kithran in the galaxy would carry his creation in their bodies. "When will we know if it works?" General Morgan asked during one of her visits. Hayes looked at his screens showing the pathogen spread across Kithran space. "When they try to attack someone. The weapon is designed to remain dormant until triggered. It could be days, weeks, or months before they discover what we have done." "And you are certain it will only affect aggressive Kithrans?" "Completely certain, General. I designed it to be absolutely precise. A Kithran child playing will be perfectly safe. A Kithran artist creating beautiful works will never be harmed. A Kithran scientist working to help others will live a long life." Hayes turned to face her, his eyes as cold as ever. "But a Kithran warrior preparing to murder doctors and children will find that his body will no longer obey his violent desires." The silent weapon was now in place, waiting patiently throughout Kithran space. Soon, the galaxy would discover what happened when someone attacked those who existed only to heal others. Commander Zektar stood on the bridge of his warship, looking down at the small mining colony of New Sheffield. The human settlement looked weak and undefended, exactly the kind of easy target that made the Kithran Empire strong. His warriors were ready for battle, their weapons charged and their battle drugs flowing through their veins. "Prepare for assault," Zektar ordered his troops. He was a large Kithran with gray skin and sharp teeth, a veteran of dozens of successful raids. "Kill the defenders quickly, then take everything of value." The Kithran warriors roared their battle cry as they prepared to attack. This was what they lived for, what their entire culture was built around. They were the strongest species in the galaxy, and they took what they wanted by force. But as Zektar raised his weapon and felt his heart race with the thrill of coming battle, something went wrong. His throat began to feel tight. His breathing became difficult, like someone was slowly squeezing his neck. Around him, his warriors were making strange gasping sounds. "Commander," one of his soldiers called out weakly, "I cannot breathe properly." Zektar tried to ignore the feeling and focus on the attack, but the tightness in his chest was getting worse. His vision began to blur as his body struggled to get enough air. "Status report," he tried to roar, but his voice came out as a whisper. "Sir, all assault teams are reporting the same problem. Our warriors cannot breathe when they prepare for combat." The attack that should have taken minutes was abandoned as Kithran soldiers collapsed on the floors of their ships, gasping for air. Only when they stopped trying to fight, when their battle chemicals returned to normal levels, could they breathe again. News of the failed attack spread quickly through Kithran space. At first, military commanders thought it was some kind of new human weapon being used in that one battle. But within days, similar reports came from across the Empire. Fleet Admiral Thekmore received the reports in his command center on the Kithran homeworld. He was the highest military leader of his species, a warrior who had conquered 17 star systems for the Empire. The news he was reading made no sense. "Every single military operation?" he asked his aide. "Yes, sir. Every attempted raid, every assault, every aggressive action results in the same thing. Our warriors cannot breathe when they try to fight." Thekmore stood and paced around his office. "What about defensive actions? If we are attacked?" "Defensive combat seems to work normally, sir. The breathing problems only happen when our forces try to attack others." The implications hit Thekmore like a physical blow. The Kithran Empire was built on conquest and aggression. If their warriors could not attack, their entire civilization would collapse. "Get me Dr. Valnuth," he ordered. "Our best scientists need to figure out what is happening to our people." Dr. Velnuth was a small, nervous Kithran who studied diseases and biological threats. When she examined the affected warriors, what she found terrified her. "Admiral, every Kithran on every world we have tested carries the same biological agent in their bodies," she reported. "It appears to be a virus that targets our respiratory system. Can you cure it?" "That is the strange part, sir. It is not making anyone sick. The virus only becomes active when our warriors take combat drugs or when their stress levels reach combat intensity. It seems designed to prevent aggressive behavior while leaving everything else normal." Thekmore felt cold fear creep through his body. Who could create such a weapon? Based on its sophistication and the way it specifically targets our species, it could only be humans, sir. No other species has this level of knowledge about our biology. The paralysis of the Kithran military sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Species that had lived in fear of Kithran raids suddenly found peace. Trade routes that had been too dangerous to use became safe again. Planets that had spent fortunes on defense could finally focus on building better lives for their people. But the other major powers in the galaxy were not celebrating. Ambassador Lisa Thompson sat in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, facing representatives from dozens of species. The questions came fast and angry. "How did your people develop such a weapon without anyone knowing?" demanded Councillor Vexen of the Altrian Federation. "If you can create a biological weapon that targets Kithran specifically, what prevents you from creating similar weapons for our species?" asked the Zentorian representative. Thompson had been prepared for these questions, but facing the fear and suspicion in the room was still difficult. "The weapon was developed in response to the unprovoked attack on the Mercer's Dawn. We used it only against a species that had violated the most basic laws of civilized warfare." "But you could create weapons against us too," pressed the Draxian ambassador. "If you chose to." The uncomfortable silence that followed answered the question better than any words could. Back on Earth, Admiral Marcus Webb reviewed intelligence reports about the changing balance of power in the galaxy. The Kithran paralysis was working exactly as Hayes had predicted, but it was causing other problems. "Sir, we are getting reports that former Kithran slave worlds are declaring independence," his aide reported. "Some are asking for human protection." "And how are our allies responding?" "They are nervous, sir. Very nervous. The Altarians have quietly begun developing new biological defense systems. The Zentorians are limiting trade with human worlds. Everyone is afraid that we might decide to use similar weapons against them." Webb nodded grimly. Hayes had succeeded in stopping Kithran aggression, but he had also made humanity the most feared species in the galaxy. Every alien government was now wondering if their people could be paralyzed or killed by human biological weapons. The weapon had worked perfectly. But the price of that success was just beginning to be understood. 2 years after the Kithran paralysis began, Dr. Robert Hayes stood before the largest gathering of alien representatives the galaxy had ever seen. The Great Assembly Hall on Neutral Station was filled with delegates from every known species, all of them staring at the quiet human who had changed their universe forever. Hayes looked different now than he had when he first lost his family. His hair had turned completely white, and his face showed the weight of what he had become. But his eyes still held that same cold fire that had frightened everyone who met him. "Representatives of the galaxy," Hayes began, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall, "I have asked you here today to discuss the future of peace among our species." The Altrian delegate, Councillor Vexen, leaned forward. "Dr. Hayes, your weapon has crippled the Kithran Empire. Their military cannot function. But what assurance do we have that you will not use similar weapons against the rest of us?" Hayes smiled that cold smile that had become famous throughout known space. "I am glad you asked that question, Counselor. It allows me to be completely clear about the situation." He activated a holographic display that showed star charts of every major civilization in the galaxy. "Over the past 2 years, my research teams have developed biological agents similar to the Kithran pathogen for every species represented in this room." The hall erupted in angry voices and frightened whispers. The Zentorian ambassador stood up quickly. "You are threatening us all." "No," Hayes said calmly, waiting for the noise to quiet down. "I am offering you all protection. These weapons exist in secure storage facilities throughout human space. They will never be used unless human civilian or medical targets are deliberately attacked." Fleet Commander Thekmore of the Kithran spoke from his seat. His people had been forced to change everything about their society over the past 2 years. "What you have done to my people, it is not natural. We cannot live as we were meant to live." Hayes looked directly at the Kithran commander. "Your people were meant to attack hospital ships? To kill doctors and wounded children? If that is how you were meant to live, then perhaps it is time for your people to find a new way. We have changed, Thekmore said quietly. We trade now instead of raid. We negotiate instead of conquer. But we do so because we have no choice. Your weapon forces us to be peaceful. And the result, Hayes replied, is that refugee ships no longer fear your fleets. Medical vessels can travel safely through your space. Children of other species sleep peacefully in their beds instead of hiding from your warriors. If that is wrong, then I choose to be wrong. Dr. Emily Richardson, who had survived the Mercer's dawn and now worked with Hayes, stood to address the assembly. The Hayes Foundation has been established to protect non-combatant vessels and personnel throughout the galaxy. We now operate 73 medical ships, all staffed by volunteers from multiple species. Not one has been attacked in the past 18 months. Ambassador William Fletcher of Earth added, piracy rates have dropped by 90%. Trade wars have been replaced by trade agreements. Species that have fought for generations are working together on scientific projects. The galaxy is more peaceful than it has been in recorded history. But it is peace through fear, argued the Draxian representative. Every species now knows that humans can kill them if they choose to. Hayes nodded. Yes, it is peace through fear. Fear is sometimes the only thing that stops violence. Every parent knows this when they teach their children not to hurt others. Every civilization knows this when they create laws with punishments. He walked closer to the assembled delegates. The difference is that my weapons are absolutely precise. A Kithran can live a full, happy life as long as they do not try to hurt innocent people. A Draxian merchant will never be affected by the pathogen I have created for your species. But a Draxian pirate who attacks a refugee ship will find their nervous system shutting down within minutes. The Altrian counselor spoke again. And what happens if you die, Dr. Hayes? What happens to these weapons? The Hayes Foundation will continue after I am gone. My research has been shared with a select group of human scientists who understand the responsibility they carry. The weapons will exist as long as they are needed to protect the innocent. And if we find cures? If we develop defenses against your pathogens? Hayes's expression did not change. Then I will develop new ones. I have studied the biology of every species in this galaxy more deeply than anyone has studied them before. I can create targeted diseases faster than you can develop defenses against them. But remember, you only need defenses if you plan to attack those who cannot defend themselves. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was already clear. The galaxy had entered a new age, one where aggression against civilians carried an automatic death sentence. Species that had built their cultures on conquest were forced to find new purposes. Pirates became merchants or died choking on their own aggression. Slave traders found their breathing systems failing when they tried to capture innocents. Years later, Hayes stood in the memorial garden dedicated to the victims of the Mercer's dawn. The names of his wife Sarah and daughter Anna were carved into white stone, along with hundreds of others who had died that terrible day. The galaxy calls me a monster now, he said quietly to their memory. Maybe they are right. I have become something I never wanted to be. But their children are safe, Sarah. Medical ships travel without fear. Doctors can heal without worrying about being murdered for their mercy. He touched Anna's name with a trembling finger. I gave up my soul to make sure no other little girl would die while drawing pictures for sick patients. I became the thing that guards the guardians, the monster that protects those who protect others. The stars above offered no judgment, but Hayes had made his peace with what he had become. The galaxy slept safely under his protection, and that was enough.